Hey folks, it's been a while, but I think it's finally time for another review. And this time it's an interesting idea that combines elements of survival horror and RPGs with the roguelike deck builder genre. Is it a freakish abomination or a ray of hope in the dark? This is the good, the bad, and the bland of Draft of Darkness. Draft of Darkness puts the player in the role of a survivor in a rather nebulous apocalypse fueled by a mysterious material known as darkness. And how will you survive and uncover the mysteries behind the darkness and the events preceding this game? Card games. The basic gameplay loop is pretty straightforward and sees the player trying to navigate their way tile by tile through 3 locations in randomly generated dungeons filled with enemies, random events, the occasional puzzle or NPC, potential party members, and sifting through drawers for precious resources and equipment as they search for the exit and the boss guarding it. All the while, trying to find a means to stop the omnipresent darkness. Combat is really where the game starts coming together, as cards can oftentimes have not only an energy cost, but a resource cost depending on the type of weapon the card is for. Typically with the ability to use the card for a much weaker basic hit should you either run out of or just want to conserve your resources. The combat also has a sort of time-based turn system with a bar for each participant that fills up as time passes whenever a turn is not immediately happening. All of this means buffs and debuffs are extremely helpful, and consumable items you can find while scavenging can help make tougher fights more manageable at the cost of some of your finite resources. And considering most consumables have both an in-combat and out-of-combat use, this can add another layer to the decision-making of how best to use what limited things you find. Now as you fight through enemies, you'll gain new cards, occasionally find some resources and items, and gain XP to level up your survivors, granting you a stat point to apply to one of the 4 stats. Handiness for increasing your physical power, endurance for increasing your health and available energy, agility for increasing your crit chance and faster action speed, and intelligence for increasing your healing and the non-physical damage types. Defeating bosses and elite enemies also nets the player a trophy, items that can give an overall passive buff to everyone on the team, or more specialized ones that need to be assigned to a character to grant them their buff, with the ability to change who it's assigned to whenever you're not in combat. Gear can not only increase your defenses against certain types of damage, but can also grant you things like extra energy or speed, or have cards tied to them that can sometimes make the decision of which piece to equip a little bit more tactical than just the piece with the highest defense or power. To help point you in the right direction with these decisions, each character has a perk which can help determine how you want to attempt to build their deck to give you the best chance at making it through this nightmare world. Fighting also brings a potential downside for each area in the form of the darkness level. Almost every fight you complete causes it to increase, which in turn makes all non-boss enemies stronger, with higher darkness levels eventually causing a permanent random debuff in that area for your characters. Also, make sure you don't dally around too long. Who knows what else is out there in the dark. In between areas, you'll get the ability to use a special resource you receive off of the bosses, and very occasionally through events and scavenging, to upgrade cards, heal some of your character's HP, or remove cards from your character's decks. This brings us to the game's quests and narrative format, which, yes, this deck builder does have actual plot lines and a story to deliver, and it's handled in quite interesting ways and uses the fact it's a roguelike to its advantage. Certain chains requiring you to start a quest in Area 1, then progressing to a second or third area of a run, finding the appropriate event and potentially solving it as best you can with the proper choices, before continuing the chain back in Area 1 on the next run. This game is relatively kind in regards to pointing you in the right direction for these quests, having a handy flowchart in its glossary that fills in at the end of runs as you complete objectives in individual chains, showing you roughly which area you'd need to go to, but without straight up telling you the solution. There's also plenty of notes to find randomly throughout the area that help add more context to the world and what's going on, but the game still leaves it to you to piece everything together. The game also features an interesting post-run unlock system, with events and quest chains unlocking additional characters, additional party member types, or trophies for future runs, in addition to giving you a currency to gain new starting items, perk options, or booster packs to unlock additional moves for weapons to customize a character's starting deck, allowing you to fine-tune the type of deck you want to run and try out different strategies to offer a bit of variety. Now that we've covered most of the basics, let's get into the things I really enjoyed about the game. Before starting this game, I had doubts that they would be able to balance the feelings of an RPG and a deck builder while still having it feel like a survival horror experience. I was extremely glad that those doubts were unfounded, as all of the systems work together to complement the experiences of the other. Managing your gear and resources, figuring out which party members to pick and how best to make use of them, deciding what stats you'll need to make your deck the most effective, as well as figuring out what card and upgrade choices to make all feel very engaging and enjoyable. I also really like the way the narrative ties in with the multiple runs, leaving a bit of mystery and a sense of discovery as you unlock more and more pieces of the puzzle. I really like how each set of weapons feels different enough that there's quite a variety of playstyles and strengths to figure out, as well as a lot of the customization you can get from grabbing the booster packs and fine-tuning a deck to give you an early edge. The game's difficulty options are also handled pretty well, with the standard difficulty being generous enough that you can be a bit more liberal with your ammo and supplies, while still requiring you to manage it well enough so you have enough stuff to get through the bosses, and the harder, less resource-friendly difficulties being locked until you clear a run of the previous tier. The overall atmosphere of the game is pretty great too, and sells what they're going for very well. The music is dark, the sound effects fit, and the designs for the enemies are appropriately disturbing in a lot of cases. With those out of the way, let's take a look at some of the points of the game that didn't quite fully work for me. A lot of things I'm about to talk about I hesitate to call bad, but they were definitely where I found my enjoyment waning on several occasions. Starting with the maps. While I like the exploring aspect and finding the events and quest chains to uncover mysteries was enjoyable, it starts to drag when some of the maps can become relatively large, and with certain events requiring you to talk to someone, then complete an event, then talk to them again to progress. This can mean that you'll be going from one side of the map to the other, which can take a while. This can be cut down somewhat with a form of fast travel the game has, allowing you to quickly move to certain important NPCs or terminals you manage to find while exploring, but this can come with a downside. If you're actively avoiding fights to help prevent raising your darkness levels at the current moment, or trying not to fight too much as your health and resources are running a bit low, then fast travel can be a good way to die, as it will seemingly almost always run into the enemies if they exist on the way there and force you into combat. Which makes some sense to keep the horror tension there, but still doesn't always feel great when the option is maybe die or spend a few minutes meticulously walking across the map each way to ensure you don't explode. Which doubles back into an earlier point I alluded to. Sometimes if you take too long on a map, something will start hunting you, I think? I could never quite figure out what specifically caused it, or how long until it started, or even if it would always happen. Which is fine. I like that it's a bit of an unknown factor and incentivizes you moving around, keeps the horror atmosphere strong. What I dislike is the effects that occur when it's near and when you fight it, and the fight itself. The screen begins having weird visual effects all over the place that just feel real uncomfortable to look at. Not in a creepy way, just in an annoying to my eyes kind of way. There may be a way to turn it off, I think? But I tried multiple graphical setting toggles and it never seemed to stop, so I don't know. Also, while I enjoy the way the narrative is set up and the way it eventually starts to reveal itself, I initially disliked it, because at the start it seemed basically non-existent, only slowly revealing itself as I found more and more notes and quests. And while I think this works for the most part, a bit more of an introduction to the world would have probably done well to initially hook me into the plot. Now then, let's take a look at the parts that kind of just fell into the background. While there is a fair bit of variety in most of the areas in the game that left me seeing new things well into the multiple endings I got through in this game, I did find myself wanting just a bit more in the way of more cards for various weapons to help facilitate some other builds. Also, while you can unlock new starting items and perks with your post-run currency, you will also need more post-run currency each time you want to start a run with them, which felt a little strange and annoying, but was overall not a big enough deal that it detracted from trying them out in some of the runs. All in all, Draft of Darkness is a really unique experience, and one I had a fair bit of fun with that kept me hooked and engaged for a good long while. If you like deck builders and enjoy a bit of survival horror, or at the very least aren't put off by the darker tones and resource management aspect, then I think you'll have a good time with it as well, and I recommend giving it a shot. Thanks for watching, everyone, and take care until next time.